Hello, everybody. Welcome to the At Hearst to Mom podcast. I'm Lauren Rose. Today, we're talking about possibly the most important family foundation, which is connection. Our guest is Jessica Perkins. Jessica is an intentional parent, a single homeschooling mama of 3 who creates toys and tools for parenting, reparenting, and whole life learning. She helps parents reconnect to curiosity, joy, and wonder with resources to better understand yourself and your people while building a culture of connection at home and beyond. Welcome, Jessica. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hi, Lauren. It's so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's just start at the top. What is connection, and why do you consider it the most important family foundation?
What is connection? So I see connection in a family unit. First, starting with yourself, you have to be connected with yourself in order for you to reach out and connect with other people relationally. And then I see it kind of as this micro connection that we have in our family systems, however your family looks, right? We have all different kinds of families. And then I see connection happening in our community in a broader sense, with our neighbors, within our schools, within our workplaces, and then connection happening, kind of globally in a worldwide way. So I really believe that connection first has to start with yourself. And a lot of that has to do with tapping in back into some kind of childlike curiosity and spirit, which is a cornerstone of our homeschool lifelong learning model. And it's really about connecting to curiosity, connecting to play, connecting to communication is really important. Knowing kind of your internal landscape and your feelings and emotions. So there's like a mindfulness to it. And then being able to share that with other people and also to listen and have other people listen to you. So connection is kind of like what creates safety and belonging within. And as you're creating that safety and belonging, it gives you this autonomy and efficacy to kind of go out into the world and explore and kind of bring in new information and learning. And that can't happen unless you're feeling safe and feeling like you belong and feel connected.
Yeah, and that's what our kids need from our family unit, right? Safety and belonging. Those
Yes.
are so important. What are some ways that we know we have a good connection with our kids? Like, I feel like I've got a great connection with my kid, but how do I know that?
Yeah, I think so. You're the right person to know that for you and your child, right? I think every caretaker who spends time with a young person knows when things are going well and knows when things are feeling hard or intense. Often it comes down to kind of dysregulation within your child, but it's also dysregulation within yourself because parenting kind of unearths a lot of unhealed wounds and traumas within ourselves, and we get triggered in the things that kind of come up when we're trying to parent. And in those moments, we might not be our best parenting selves, and that can be felt in your own body, and that can also be felt in your child's body, and that is a point of where connection might not happen, and that's okay. We don't have to be 100% connected all of the time. If we have a moment where we are feeling triggered and activated and we kind of rupture that connection that we have with our child, it's okay that happens sometimes. That's normal. That's a part of humaning. And really the repair work of that is what makes that connection kind of come full circle again, and brings that connection back. So it's okay to have these moments where you might not be your best parenting self, as long as you can circle back around and have, make amends, maybe apologize if you were triggered or activated and kind of lashing out your own wounds at your young person. Or I find oftentimes, so I think of it too in kind of like the hierarchy of needs. I try to put my investigator hat on when my child is like giving me is having a hard time and we're having a power struggle of some kind. There is disconnection, there's chaos, right? And so if I can kind of put on my investigator magnifying glass and just be like, what's going on right now that's creating this disconnect with us? Is there something going on? Like, did they not get enough sleep? Are they hungry? Do they need to use the bathroom? Is their body hurting in some way? Are there other maybe there's too many sounds, or the lights are wrong, or like environmental factors that could factor into kind of their own body stress level. And whenever we're dysregulated within our own bodies, it's hard to find connection with another person. So I think, connection has a lot of different layers, right? Is like knowing ourselves and knowing each other. And I think that you as the parent of your child knows your child best, is what, they know themselves best, and then you know them so well. And, when you're feeling disconnected to yourself and disconnected to your child. And I guess I invite people to honor that, to know that they know, and to feel into that intuition.
Yeah, so you're talking about behavior kind of leads me into this question. You had a blog post from August 17th, 2019. It said, intense behavior in children is often a sign of feeling disconnected. So it's a coping mechanism. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it comes down to like kind of dysregulation in your body. Whenever you, anybody, it could be your child, it could be you, if you are having too much stress happening in your body, your nervous system goes into like fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode. And oftentimes that can look like aggressive behavior in children. It could look like tantruming. It could look like crying. It's your nervous system's way of trying to reset itself, and it's having a hard time doing that. And so whenever I'm noticing that my child is having a hard time, it's really not because my child is trying to give me a hard time, right? So that's kind of a little bit of a mindset switch in my parenting, because often, when they're doing that, especially if I'm feeling anxious, like I need somewhere to go, I will, might meet them with the same intensity. And I really have to remind myself to pause and be like, okay, this isn't about me. This is about them. They're having a hard time. They're not trying to give me a hard time. Why in this moment right now are they having a hard time? And then it can kind of shift me into compassionate parent mode, where I can be like, what's going on in their environment or in their body, or in this moment right now that's creating this dysregulation that's pouring over into their behaviors. And so, yeah, it really is, it comes back down to kind of dysregulation in the nervous system.
Yeah, I've heard before that all behavior is communication. And I love that. It's exactly what you're saying. So we've figured out in our daughter, she's got extreme anxiety, and she has a terrible fear of feeling like she doesn't know something, of feeling dumb. So homework is a huge trigger for her. I mean, she just goes from perfectly fine to throwing her pencil and screaming and just all sorts of craziness. And so, I mean, we've had to realize that she's not, like you said, she's not trying to give us a hard time. She's being triggered, and her anxiety is taken over, and she is in that fight or flight mode, and she's in the fight side. So that has definitely changed the way that we have approached our parenting with her, is just by knowing her and knowing that about her. I also know that if she's hungry, she's not going to be her best self. If she's tired, if she's overstimulated, if something happened at school, if she's got a headache. So definitely, I think knowing our child is super important in this connection.
Yeah, you bring up such a great point. I think of it like a cup. Your child has a cup, and every little environmental stress or emotional stress, is filling this cup up all day long. And at some point it could be a tiny little drip, but that drip can be what sends the water inside the cup spilling over. And that's when your child is dysregulated. So you bring up this beautiful example of just like knowing your child, and then when you sit down to do homework, you realize that that's a state of environmental anxiety for her, the feeling of like perfectionism, and like you have to do it a certain way, you have to get it right. And in those moments too, when we're feeling dysregulated and our nervous systems are dysregulated, we don't have the access to flexible thinking. We are very fixed in our thinking, and rigid about it. And so it's really hard, though, whenever our nervous systems are activated, our prefrontal cortexes, which is like our wise leader, is not online. It's not calling the shots. And so it's very hard to reason with who is, who's having an activation of the nervous system, right? So it's really important in those moments to, if you feel yourself kind of going into a power struggle and being triggered, to really pause and slow down, do what you need to do to take care of yourself so that you're not continuing the escalation, but you're kind of de-escalating, right? By like pausing and breathing into yourself. And that will kind of help even everything out. And then you can come back around to it. It takes the nervous system a good, 20, 30 minutes sometimes to kind of reset and for your prefrontal cortex to come back online, depending on the severity of the emotional dysregulation. So, some people want to be like, okay, they see their child, they did this thing and they want to like go right in and like correct, right? But that can feel like criticism. And that can also be an additional stress, which will continue the dysregulation. So we need to reconnect with each other, lean into the connection, lean into like our breath, lean into whatever kind of tool you have in your toolbox for that specific child or for yourself that will kind of like help reset and recenter you. And then you can come back around to it later when you're all in a good spot. But you need to get your bodies and your nervous systems back into that connected spot again.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point that it's up to us as the adults to, regulate the situation, to bring it back down to calm. So even though, we want to be yelling at our child for their behavior, we as the adults have a lot more in our toolbox to be able to regulate ourselves. And the kids are still learning. So we've got to bring that calm to the situation, or it really is going to be a terrible power struggle that's just, it's not going to end well.
Yes. And honestly, sometimes I have got this awareness, I have this language, I've got lots of tools in my toolbox, and yet I still end up in power struggles as a parent sometimes, right? Because I've got my stress cup is also full. And if I'm not taking really good care of that, if I'm not, attending to my self-care needs and using my self-care menu, that will overflow. And when my cup overflows, I'm dysregulated. So then my children are then dealing with a dysregulated grown-up. So it's very important, as you can see, to take really good care of yourself too and nurture yourself, because every little bit of that you're doing, you're kind of draining your stress cup. And when you drain it out, then it's less likely to overflow. And then you're more able to keep your prefrontal cortex online and do the things that that work, or access new tools or practice flexible thinking.
Right. So what are some easy ways that we can connect to our kids each day?
Through play. A child's bid for connection often comes with, will you play with me? When a child is asking that or inviting you into their world, it is so important to, and it doesn't even, it doesn't have to be hours and hours, but if a child is coming to you and saying, will you play? Or I want to show you this. If you can, and even if you can't, try to do it anyway, drop whatever it is and lean into that bid for connection. Julie and John Gottman talk a lot about bids for connection within relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, but also our relationships with our children. And whenever they come to you to say like, oh, I saw this cool thing, I want to share it with you, that's a time for you to like drop everything and lean into that. It doesn't take long. It's these like little tiny micro things that happen throughout the day. And if you can lean into that, your child will feel connected to you. And then we like to do kind of one-on-one play a little bit, and every child is different. There are different kind of play personalities or play styles. You have one, I have one, each of our children has one. And if you want to think about maybe the things that you really love doing as a child yourself, those are probably within your play personality even now as a grown-up. But we've kind of lost touch with our play as grown-ups. And I think it's kind of part of my mission is to help grown-ups realize that leaning into play for themselves helps to kind of drain that stress cup that I was talking about, so that you can take on additional kind of stressors in life without it rocking the boat. So I would recommend thinking about what you like to do to play, what brings you joy, and then thinking about what your child does, what brings them joy. And if there's a place that those areas overlap, then the play won't feel so hard, because I often hear from parents like, oh, but I don't know how to play, or play feels so hard for me. If you can find an overlap somewhere where your play personality and their play personality like overlaps, that's kind of the sweet spot of play, because then you're kind of filling your own cup in relation, and then they're doing the same thing, and it just feels so good. Of course, sometimes I show up to play with my child in service to my child. You know, it's not within my realm of play personality, but I realize how important it is for them, and so I might do it anyway. But if you can find some areas where they overlap and then regularly schedule those into kind of your weekly rhythm, that's a really good way to kind of nurture the connection and nurture the play for everyone involved and for the relationship.
Yeah, my daughter, maybe that's why my daughter and I have a really good relationship, because we do play a lot. She plays to pretend, she plays dolls with me, she plays just all sorts of stuff, and it's almost every day that she wants to play at some point. And yeah, there are lots of times I don't feel like playing, but I'll go do it, and then, 20 minutes into it, she's good. She's had her fill of the play, and so I can go back to my grown up, thoughts and actions, and yeah, but we do play a lot, so that's interesting.
Yeah, you're
But yeah,
leaning into that bid for connection and fueling that, right? It feels so
yeah,
good.
and I try to get my husband and my daughter to play more, but he doesn't play Barbies like I do, right? He's got his own way of playing these different things. And so I guess I need to encourage them to find things that they can do differently than she and I do that brings them connection and joy too. Because I mean, they've got a good relationship, but as far as playing goes, it's not as intense as hers and mine.
Yeah, and play. So let me think about what my children, my some of them like really love to move their bodies and dance. Some of them really like to sit down and do art. Some of them are big tinkerers, like just, a box of Legos or even random like cardboard pieces in a hot glue, and they like are tinkering and building. Rube Goldberg machines are really big right now still. There's so many different ways to play, and I'm sure that if you just shine a light on your husband's kind of play personality and help that they can kind of navigate where their play overlaps. I also want to say too, like sometimes we can't lean into play as parents. Like life really is hard sometimes, and it's okay to set boundaries for yourself around play as well. But if you can carve out, even if it's 10 minutes a day of this, just like one-on-one, I'm really following your lead. I'm not trying to direct it. I'm just like showing up for my child and meeting them where they are and listening. That can go such a long way. You think like, oh, I don't have time for this, but in my experience, if I carve out the time to do it, it means like less tantrums, less power struggles, less, so all of that stuff takes up so much time, and it's all the negative junky parts of parenting. But if you just carve out that time of the really good connection, then it seems to kind of smooth out all the other parts. So you're still spending the time, but it's like, okay, how do I want to be spending this time? Can I do it more intentionally in a more positive way? So if you can lean into it, it can be helpful.
That's such an interesting perspective, that we're already spending time, but is it in a negative way or is it in an intentional and positive way? That's really
Yeah.
interesting. So maybe that's how we change our mindsets, and we put our phones down and we pause our to-do lists and we go do that connection, is that we think about that. We're already going to spend 10 minutes with them having a tantrum because they're not getting their way, or we could just spend an intentional 10 minutes in connection with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So explain your do your four things rule regarding your kids' screen time. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so we are a homeschooling family, and that does not mean that we do school at home. We are lifelong learners, myself included. And screens, I kind of, I love screens. They provide so many learning opportunities. They help with regulation sometimes. And then for other children, they actually help to dysregulate. So it's really about like knowing your own child. But I have found that if I just kind of put a blanket rule of you have to do these 4 things before you can have access to a screen today. And the 4 things are do something good for your heart, do something good for your brain, do something good for your body, and do something good for your community. And, we developed a list together of kind of ideas around each of those. And they get to choose. So it's still giving them autonomy and still giving them choice and agency around how they want to spend their time. And, when it's a blanket rule, it's easier to be like, okay, well, did you do your 4 things today? No? Okay, well, you need to go do that. And I have also found that once they start, when screens are not an option, they don't become the default. So if I'm, it's creating this space to encourage other kinds of exploration. And I've found that whenever that space is created, that's what they choose to do. That's what they want to do. Screens are still part of our lives. We utilize them as tools. We utilize them for enjoyment. But I have found that even encouraging them to do these 4 things kind of leads to them doing even more than the 4 things, because once they get involved in play, like they're involved in it, right? And so it's kind of like the same concept of being bored. Like, don't just fill it with a screen. If you leave the space for boredom, beautiful, magical things come out of it, are born out of boredom.
Oh, that's really cool. So again, talking about play, you also make toys. What got you into toy making, and what kind of toys do you make?
So my toy brand is Mama May I, like the game Mother May I, but Mama. And I make a line of very back to basic, simple, intentional, beautiful imagination powered toys. So think they're very wooden, they're very natural, Montessori, Waldorf kind of creations. And I had started to create them when my oldest, who will be 15 soon, was a baby. My background is in psychology, early childhood and development, and art and design. And it just was a natural, easy path for me. I was a stay-at-home mom, but I wanted to make beautiful, sustainable, natural toys for my daughter. And I wanted to know what ingredients, where it was being sourced and all of those kinds of things. And eventually friends and family were like, why don't you sell these things? And I didn't think there was a market for it, but sure enough, there was a market for it. So since then I've had 2 other children, and some have some sensory differences. And so a lot of it is very sensory oriented. It's about children making sense of their world through sensing their worlds. Everything in the collection can kind of build on itself. So you can start with one thing, then slowly kind of add over time to your collection, but they are all, like the same kind of wood and the same kind of colors. So that's also where the magic happens, is when children start to put them together in new and novel ways. That's the part that I love the most, is just like watching the play unfold with the toys and the things that I've made.
That's cool. I love that you took your early childhood psychology and your art and combined them into something really cool.
It was so not intentional. It just was like, I feel very privileged in having been able to kind of follow the breadcrumbs of my passions kind of throughout my life. And I student taught when I was in high school. I did art on a cart when I was in college, and it was kind of like all of these things that really like nurtured and fueled me. I got to turn into this beautiful business. And then I also get to do this other part, which is advocating for, healthy family systems and communication and curiosity and building the culture of connection at home. So it's kind of like this really beautiful marriage of play and of connection together.
That's awesome. So where can we get more information about you and about what you do?
Yeah, I would love to connect more. We have a bunch of freebies on our website, which is just jessicaperkins.com. You can also shop our toy line right there on the website. You can sign up for a consultation to just have like a one-on-one coaching session with me, and you can continue the conversation online on social media. Mama May I Shop is our Instagram handle and our Facebook handle, and I would love to connect more.
Awesome. I will make sure I'm already getting your emails. I'm going to make sure that I follow you too.
Yeah, I love that.
And thanks so much for coming on. Everybody, make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any health, parenting, or life advice. For my freebie, which is 30 ways to relieve pain without taking a pill, go to @hurtstomom.com/tips or @ithurtstomom on Instagram under pain relief. If you have any comments, suggestions, or want to be on this podcast, email me at ithurtstomom@gmail.com. I wish everybody a blessed, fun, and playful day. Bye.
Thank you so much.